Right on. So here we are, Jack.
All right.
My first time meeting you was last year, roughly around last year when I was invited to speak on First Fridays,
Okay, great.
right? I
Yep.
think that was about my first time
Yep.
meeting you.
And then you were at one of our cultural picnics or cultural dinners.
Yes, and that was just this last spring, I believe.
Okay.
Yep. That was when you had the potluck for the Growing Together Community Gardens. I came by myself and I met Carissa and her boyfriend there at the time. But everybody else was pretty much new faces to me. You had introduced me to somebody who had came from, a place overseas. But he came here and he's been involved in the Growing Together Community Gardens. I think he makes baklava, so I don't
Okay.
know where that is native to. But anyhow, I had a really good conversation with him, talking about his experiences traveling from across the earth and now being here. And then I also just really enjoyed the company. And I remember the potluck, the table was the biggest table I think I've ever seen for a potluck. And so it was just really warm, welcoming, and a lot of great conversation. And so yeah, that was a little bit of my experience there at the potluck there.
Yeah. And we just love potlucks. And what our goal is this year is we have a sign up potluck. And then what we're going to do is we're actually going to have like 3 cultural potlucks, and we haven't decided exactly what cultures that we're going to feature. So last year we did the indigenous, but the year before we did like Somalia, Liberia, Afghanistan, Kurdistan, India, and there was one other country. And what we normally do is we invite 2 different cultures at each of the potlucks, and what they will do is make their cultural meals, and they have their own table set up, and then everybody else brings their offerings, and they'll go through the cultural table first, and go through the other tables. And then what we also do is at the end of our potluck, we let the two different cultures have like 10 minutes each, and then also give them time to answer questions. And they normally come in their cultural dress, which is really nice too.
Very cool. Awesome. So yeah, I want to give a little bit of a context as to, I guess, why I'm here today and why I'm having a conversation with you. I've been really fascinated by how we as human beings can really connect to the earth and each other and develop more meaningful and deep relationships, especially when it comes to difficult times in our lives, whether it be individual, family, or on a whole cultural society level. Myself, I was very distanced from the land or working with the land at all for most of my life. It was really until moving to the Fargo-Moorhead area that I really got my hands dirty and started working with the soil and with plants and whatnot. And since then, it feels as though a whole new wave of life has come into my life. Since working with the land and being involved in the community, the local food community. And there's a phrase that's come about a lot throughout my experience here, which is many hands make light work.
Yeah, that's one of our mottos.
Yes, and I saw it on your website, and it's such a simple phrase, but I think that it rings really true in terms of when we work with the land and when we grow together food. And I just think that what Growing Together is doing is really powerful in terms of this revitalization of the land and this trajectory that I think we're on as a society to returning more closely to the land. So yeah, that's sort of what the impulse has been. And I think that, sharing a little bit about what you're doing will be a good thing for folks to hear about. So,
Oh, good. Well, thank you. So basically, this will be our 18th year growing together. We started out in a small garden with basically 8 families, We probably had like 3 leaders, and it was a church base, so we had of course, the church women would come and make us dinners and things like that. So it was pretty cool. And as we started out, basically we had plots that we would have like 2 or 3 members work with like a new American family, and then half of the garden was a shared garden that we worked together. And as we developed through the years, we found out that the shared gardens did so much better because we took care of them every week. Where the plot is, if someone went to the lakes and he was gone for 3 weeks, when he came back, his garden was either overgrown, the weeds had taken over, maybe it was dry and things weren't watered. And so basically at the end of the 3rd year, the community decided we want to do everything shared. We don't really want to have plots anymore. So today, everything is shared.
Perfect. Right. Yeah, that's a beautiful thing. Sharing the workload, and then at the end of the season, the whole community shares the produce at the end, right?
Yep.
I've seen those photos where you have everything boxed up, and yeah.
And so basically what happens is there are no fees charged to any of our gardeners. It's all free, but they have to work 20 hours to be a full share member. So what it does is sort of engages them to come to the garden each week, starting in April we do like the prep for the garden, and then in May we're actually starting in planting, but we're also transplanting at the same time. So as they get too close to like our first harvest dates are probably like the 2nd week in July when we first start getting like a bunch of our greens and things. Mm-hmm. So everybody by then is usually a full share member.
Very, very cool. Yes, and then it's very community oriented, is what it seems.
Yep.
The whole growing together.
And the way that I sort of compare it is like when I first moved to Fargo, we needed to find a church home. So we went like every Sunday, like 4 Sundays in a row, we went to a different church. And you could feel like when you were welcome to a church. And I can remember we belonged to Olivet Lutheran Church, and Doris Pagel sat behind us in church. And as soon as the church service was over, she was asking us about her kids, and then she dragged us back to the lead pastor and introduced us, and we said, this is our home. And I think the same thing happens with the gardens. Is we definitely encourage the gardeners to visit different gardens. And I think one thing about this volunteering at the New Life, we're bringing gardeners from all of our 9 different gardeners to work together, to talk together, and so they hone into that garden that specifically calls to them.
I like that a lot. How you can it allows people to connect with maybe a certain piece of land or connect with a certain person that speaks to them. I think that having options is great, for sure. And that sounds really fascinating. So what does the year ahead look like? Is there going to be another potluck sort of thing, like last year?
So this year we've scheduled. So first we have the leadership meeting, which we definitely want to maybe invite you to.
Okay.
And then followed with that is we call it our sign up potluck. Mm-hmm. So new people can come, and then also our returning members can come. And we talk a little bit about each garden, and then we're going to have 3 cultural potlucks, and we'll be putting together like a committee to decide. They will probably be, we normally do it when the gardens are producing food. So it'll probably be like July, August, and September. Mm-hmm. So.
Okay. Sweet. Awesome. Cool. Yeah, so it's a little bit of the happenings, growing together, community gardens. Yes, one thing I've been reading about too lately, I just got this book. It's called Slow Money, and it's sort of tied to slow food. I don't know if you've ever heard of that.
I've heard of slow food.
Slow food. Right. So in Slow Money, Woody Tash, the author, he talks about how we don't need any more big ideas. We have all the big ideas down, but now it's time for going smaller and having small, beautiful ideas to change the landscape that we're in right now as a global species, right? And he talks, and so that it just reminds me of like small farms, small communities, like small, beautiful things that we can do on a small scale that are very easily accomplishable, that can really transform the global landscape. Similarly to how I think he was talking about in the book, how the Industrial Revolution, the Industrial Age, it seemed like a great idea during that time to try and feed the world, mass produce all this food, and fix all these problems with all these big ideas. But in the process, it's slowly, when we tried to mass produce the food, we degraded the soil slowly over time. I think that maybe the path backwards is going to be slowly rebuilding the soil,
Well, you could see some of that rebuilding coming on with the no-till stuff, that's moving along.
Yeah.
The only disadvantage is all the chemicals that we use to produce our crops. Say we want to be able to spray our corn so we don't have any weeds in it, and eventually they're going to find out, as we found out, after World War II with Agent Orange, and we're finding out all the different things that we have done with chemicals have been very, very harmful to our society. Mm-hmm. And we don't know it right away, but 20 years from now, then we'll know that we did have an issue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so I see growing together community farms as these little pockets where revitalization is happening, and not only just for the earth, but also for the community and the people. And growing together community farms, this sort of was this organization built out of an impulse to help immigrants
Yep. So
who are new to the Fargo-Moorhead area,
So
right?
I'll tell you a little bit about the beginning. So in the beginning, there was the church president and the church minister. It was we had a social worker, and then there was a school superintendent. They met together, and one of the things they talked about is how can we better welcome new Americans into our community. And at that time was the Liberians were resettling in Fargo, and a lot of them were widows with children, and their husbands had all been killed in their civil wars. And so one of the ideas was a garden, and my friend Tom Lorenzen, who was the president of the council, says, we don't really know a lot about gardening, but I said, we should call Jack. And so I can still remember 10 o'clock that night, he called me and said, would you help me with this garden? And I said, well, sure. And I guess at that time, all I was thinking about was more tomato plants and how I could grow out these tomatoes. But then as I started working in the garden, then I found out it was more about just what we grew, but it was more about the people that we were taking care of. And we still have some of her name is Rosaline Soiree. Anyways, she is one of our founding members of our garden, and she's still with us today, which is pretty cool.
Very cool. And yes, I think it's relevant to the times. I hear a lot of talk about immigration, whether it be legal or illegal immigration, or just people coming to America in general. I think that working with the land, teaching others how to work with the land, is just a great way to welcome in new folks.
Yep.
I think whether you're in America or any other geographical location on the earth, I think that this is a good way of going about integrating folks into a new place.
Yep. And I think one thing that we found out is, like that first year that we planted things, we found out nobody likes beets because they taste like dirt, and just different things. But we found out like bringing a tray of roasted beets and letting them sample them, all of a sudden they had the new love for beets.
Right.
And the same thing at the end of the year, we would probably compost like 30 to 40 5-gallon buckets of green tomatoes because no one wanted them. But we brought in fried tomatoes, and now it's like they'd say, can't we have some green tomatoes? We don't want all these ripe tomatoes. We'd like to have green ones too. So it's, part of it was educating us and the different things that they loved, like hot peppers, which, most of us have Nordic backgrounds. We like our stuff pretty bland. And to understand there is a world outside of what we actually eat. And the same thing with like eggplants we really didn't grow in our gardens, but we found that it definitely is an international food.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Tomatoes, yes. When I think of you, I think of the Tomato Man. And I remember, that was the first thing. I think my mentor, Verna, she said that you do a lot of great things with tomatoes. And I was just reading about tomatoes in an agriculture book. And I was reading about how tomatoes enjoy raw compost, and that tomatoes are very independent plants, and they can thrive in very raw environments.
Yeah.
And it was pointing to the notion that you could just find a tomato plant growing in just like a leftover compost from the season before. And I definitely noticed that this last season being at the farm, these tomato plants were just like popping out of all these different places. So what is it about tomatoes that you are called to connect with?
Well, I think, probably the number one thing on the tomato is because the tomato is a self-pollinated plant. It's easy to save seeds, where a lot of your, especially like squash and cucumbers and zucchini, they have a tendency to cross-pollinate, so the actual seed will become some new morphed type vegetable. So where the tomato, there are a few varieties of tomatoes that do cross, but most of the ones that we grow do not. And so one of the things that we do is tomatoes are actually fairly wild, but we actually tame them. So each of our tomatoes is staked, and then we also do a lot of pruning, and then we seed save. And so we started, it's called the Tomato Seed Savers Club, and to date we have saved 259 different varieties of tomatoes. And we've also, through my new Facebook site that I found, it's called Tomato Obsession, I have found a couple people that are willing to trade seeds with us, which will definitely help propel our collection. And it's I'm just trying to figure out. So now we probably have like 30,000 seeds, and we don't really have any type of a distribution. So, and as I've been reading, there's people like with Etsy shops that are selling, like 7,000 to 8,000, different seed packets every year. So it's definitely something we're going to enjoy. But the club basically just love tomatoes, and we have so there's basically 3 founding members, me, and then Dan Goring, and then Randy Bach, and Randy is sort of the mathematician, and he sort of added up the years that us 3 have been planting tomatoes, and we felt we've been planting tomatoes for over 150 years. So we do have a little bit of experience. We also have a brochure so basically that gives you the 10 tips on planting tomatoes. We do like a tomato plant sale in the spring, and definitely people are welcome to come to our plot to help us. And we meet Tuesdays and Thursdays from 8 to 9:45 a.m. in the morning. So
very cool. Right on. And that's for the Seed Savers Club?
That's for the Seed Savers. And then for Growing Together, so basically every Tuesday and every Thursday, we basically garden from 8 in the morning till 8 at night. So
Okay.
there's so as you go on our website, growingtogetherfm.org, you can see the different it's got a map in there that you can see where the gardens are located, and then it shows also the different times. And there's if you work from noon to 9, you could definitely garden in the morning, and if you get off at 5, you definitely can come to our garden and work during the evening. So it's pretty cool. And then the other thing we have is we have what we call a special ops. And right now, today, we're at New Life Center. This is our special ops team. So these are people that are sort of working beyond the schedule. They also work like transplanting. They work at our market. They work in April and October cleaning up our gardens. So basically, at the end, we want our gardens to be put to sleep, ready to go for the spring. And in the spring, we want to reevaluate, if we need fertilizer needs for anything, or just to make sure that first week in May that we are ready to plant in the gardens.
Fantastic. That sounds like a lot of fun, being out there all day.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh, man, nothing better. Yeah. Well, this is fantastic. Yeah. I haven't myself been to a Growing Together garden yet, so hopefully this year I can get to one and meet the people.
Yeah, and so we are working on a couple new projects for this year. We're actively talking to NDSU about a possible student-led and faculty-led garden up there. We have a few hoops to jump through. Mm-hmm. And then we're talking to the Touchmark, which is a retirement community in South Fargo. They are thinking about a possibility of doing a garden. And then we're also working with the YWCA. They built a new women's residence last fall, which was a pretty big deal. And we're looking at possibly helping them in their big backyard, starting a garden there.
Awesome. Yeah. Growing Together continues to grow.
Yeah, we definitely do.
Definitely.
So one of the things about Growing Together, we feel that our model could work anywhere in the world. Yes. So it's on our website. There's a toolkit that basically gives you some of the fundamentals as far as you need, like, you need communications. You need land, of course. That's very important. You need access to water, and yes, you can haul water, but it's nice if you have like a spigot that you could just open to when you need the water. You need some type of tool storage, and yes, you can put your tools in your trunk and bring them every week, but it's sort of nice to have a place where you can hang them up at the end of the session. And then you just need to have like 2 or 3 dedicated leaders that can start rounding up volunteers. And the way that we have rounded up volunteers is like definitely through Facebook, through exposure, doing podcasts like this. Mm-hmm. Just when anybody calls me up from Kiwanis or different groups that want us to come and speak, we come to speak, and just keep hammering out there. And sometimes, like when I was at NDSU this morning talking to Dr. Gia, and she says, I walked by your garden almost every day, but I've never stopped. Mm. And it's how can we reach those people to have them stop at the garden and find out what it's all about?
Right. Yeah. What I would say to that is to those folks, I would say be curious. Don't be afraid to go up, just start talking to somebody, because there's always room for another set of hands in the.
Yeah, and then what we find is like when we're doing the April prep work, there's always a car that stops and they say, well, what is this all about? And fortunately now we've been able to put signs at all of our gardens that tell us the contact information, who they can contact. In the past, I think people would go to the garden, they wouldn't, if they weren't there while we were there, they really didn't know what it was all about.
Right.
But
yeah, I think that's awesome for everybody listening. growingtogetherfm.org is the website, and there's a section that you can go to view this toolkit you have called, right?
That's on the just go through it and you'll find it. The other thing that's really cool is we work with Julie Garden Robinson, which writes in the forum with recipes. Mm-hmm. And like when we started the first week in May, the second week in May, there's not a whole lot of veggies that are ready, but the weeds are rapidly growing.
Right.
So there's recipes for purslane, which you can make pickles and do different curries, and then it goes into lamb's quarters, and then what I call pigweed, but it's actually amaranth, but just different weeds, and then of course then it's, so when you get into early June, it's talking about spinach, and basically where did spinach actually come from, and then the different recipes for it, and just different stories. So you can find all of those on the website, and we also have a cookbook, so that's available at Gethsemane Cathedral that you can pick up on too.
Fascinating. The toolkit is really awesome. I looked
Yep.
through it the other day, and I just think it's fantastic for anybody who has any ideas of getting started or knows somebody who's getting something started. It's a great place. It goes through what all you need to get going and how to operate a community garden as such.
And I think when you start, it's overwhelming, and you definitely, as they say, you learn from your mistakes. And I remember what we did is when we first started our first garden, we planted our tomatoes probably 18 inches apart, and we had a huge windstorm, and everything was staked, and basically everything flipped over. So we definitely knew that 18 inches was way too close, and 24 inch or 30 inch would be a lot better placement.
Right. Okay, quick question about tomatoes. How important is staking
Staking is very important.
with tomatoes in particular?
Yep. And so basically what your biggest problem with tomatoes is all the different diseases that can be caused. And what happens is if you don't stake, your vegetation becomes very dense, and there's very little airflow. So what happens when you stake and you prune, there's good airflow through the plant. The other thing is you're concentrating the tomatoes on making tomatoes and not just creating all of this green growth. And if you let a tomato plant lay on the ground, especially an indeterminate plant, it'll go 12 or 13 feet, and it'll go all over your garden. So it basically tries to take it over. And we're staking. It's very simple, and part of the key is there is a science to it, of course. And we put the stake in, and then the plant is put on the northeast side of the stake. And what happens is normally the winds always come from the north and the northwest, so it protects that tomato plant. The sun is always comes from the south and the east and the west. You want it to get that early morning sun, so basically not having the stake hide that tomato plant makes a big difference in the production.
Fascinating. Yeah. Definitely. Oh, man. Very cool. Yes. So I think this is a good little introduction to folks to growing together, community gardens, and I mean, there's so much that branches off of here, just like the special ops and what is happening right here today. Maybe how did that come about? This
The special ops team.
Yeah, the special ops team, and your involvement with the New Life Center here too.
So basically, the way that the special ops team started is we would always try to get people to come to the gardens, like in April when we start in May, and also in October when everything is done and they've already picked everything. And usually, like I remember when our first gardens, I'd have my son to help me, and he'd say, "Dad," he says, "I got to go home and study." I'd say, "Well, just one more row," and so he would help, but then I figured, that sort of got old and he wouldn't help me anymore. So then we developed this special ops team, and they're very dedicated and they're very passionate about growing together. And how the New Life Center started is Bob has been going here for the last 9 years and cooking for them by himself. And soon I think he started inviting a few people here and there to cook with him. But then I said, "Bob," I said, "why don't we use the special ops team, bring it together and see if they can help. And right now, when I send out the schedule for like the next 2 or 3 weeks, people sign up super quick. And we cook on Thursdays. We decided to add a Monday schedule, and within 2 days of sending out the Monday schedule, it was completely filled up. So it's people love to be asked to do things.
Right. Yeah. Especially when it's for a greater cause.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Very cool. Yeah. Is there anything that you want to talk about?
Well, I think we've pretty much covered it.
Yeah.
I think the key is definitely growing together, fm.org, and then if you're interested, I mean, if you come to the garden once or twice and you don't like it, you can just sort of say, okay, I tried it, it's not my bag. But I think once you come and you interact with the volunteers, you're going to be like reeled in, as they say. So
Awesome. Super cool. Very good. Yeah. Well, I think maybe we'll just wrap it up there.
all right. Well, thank you very much for doing this, Mason. And
Yeah.
yep.
Thank you for sharing all your stories and growing together, Jack.
Yeah.
Let's keep going. Awesome.
All right. Thank you.